To guarantee safety when working in confined spaces, please follow these guides below. The confined space is large enough for workers to enter and perform the assigned tasks. Basically, these places are not designed for continuous human occupancy. They contain dangerous hazards, and they have one or a combination of these following limited characteristics: limited workspace and location, limited atmosphere exchange with the outside environment, limited entrance by location or size, not convenient for escaping. Common confined spaces include tank, trench, manhole, duct, etc. Working in confined spaces has the following dangerous factors: hazards, which can cause death, injury, depression, or occupational diseases. Oxygen deficient to provide for workers, lower 19.5% than the internal volume of the confined space. The presence of toxic gas, fumes, or vapors can infiltrate through the human respiratory system. Chemical exposure through skin contact. Flammable substances can exist in the form of solid, liquid, dust, vapor, or gas if exposed to a heat source that can cause fire or explosions. Unwanted material flow from the outside into the inside due to unsecured separation and isolation measures. Exceeding noise exposure limits. Moving parts and falling objects can cause injuries to people inside confined spaces. Uncontrolled electrical elements, resulting in electric shock. Limited visibility of the workers. General regulations. In order to prevent unexpected consequences from working in confined spaces, please comply with the following regulations. Warning signs of the confined spaces are always put at the entrance of the confined spaces. Workers must be trained to work in confined spaces and satisfy adequately with requirements of necessary capacity and experience to perform the assigned works. Must prepare adequately necessary resources according to requirements and characteristics of the work. Working conditions must be checked for safety and consistency with related parts. The gas tester equipment should be at the worksite, and it should have enough measuring function of the relevant objects and has set the proper alarm thresholds as required. Ensure that the confined space is isolated, loosened, washed, or cleaned with nitrogen gas. Installed blind flanges. Open the entry flanges, manhole. Conduct purging toxic air, and conduct gas testing to ensure concentration flammable gas must be less than 5% of the lower explosive limit. Hydrogen sulfide must be less than 10 parts per million. Oxygen content must be between 19.5% and 23.5% volume. And avoid gas sources from other equipment leaking into the working area. Ensure proper natural ventilation or provide enough clean air into confined spaces before and during working hours, with a minimum flow of 30 meters cubed per hour per person. Or must take measures to ensure to supply oxygen directly to each worker in confined spaces. Ensure that the exhaust from confined spaces does not cause harm to the workers outside around that confined space. Ensure adequate light for workers inside confined spaces. Use explosion-proof lights or low-voltage portable lighting equipment, 24 VAC, approved for use in Zone 2 areas. Use low-voltage electrical equipment through isolating transformer located outside confined spaces. The gas supply pipe's electric lines leading to confined spaces should not be arranged with the entrance to avoid affecting the exits in an emergency. Establish appropriate and reliable communication methods. A confined space entry permit must be licensed before allowing work in confined spaces. Prepare for responding to an emergency. The rescuers in confined spaces must be trained and coached. The emergency response plan must be informed to all participants working in confined spaces. Fire prevention, fighting, and rescue equipment must be available at the worksite. Regulations in the process of working in confined spaces. No one is allowed to enter the confined space without permission or approval by the responsible personnel at the worksite. When there is no one inside and the supervisor is absent, the entrance of the confined space must be properly shielded to prevent unauthorized people from entering confined spaces. Gas testing and monitoring must be carried out before starting and during work. In case work is stopped, retest before resuming. Must have at least 2 people at the worksite. 1 person supervises during work time. For people working in confined spaces, comply with the regulations on occupational safety, hygiene, safety procedures while working and wearing an air-breathing apparatus or respirator. Be equipped with a portable gas tester mounted on the shirt chest and check to ensure the tester works well before starting work. Comply with the direction of the supervisor and authority, and with the guidance of the confined space safety officer. Notify to the confined space safety officer, supervisors, authority, and responsible personnel if detecting perceived or real safety hazards while working in confined spaces. For supervisor of confined spaces, present at the entrance regularly to control people access and egress. Record personal information and the time of accessing and egressing the confined space. Compare it with the time and number of people allowed to access and egress according to regulations to control, preventing unauthorized, irresponsible people from entering confined spaces. Establish appropriate and reliable communication methods with workers inside confined spaces by these following methods to provide timely support and response when needed. Observe if it can be seen. Communicate verbally if distance and noise level requirements are met. Communicate by radio periodically as planned. Monitor and conduct gas testing continuously when people are working inside confined spaces, and record the gas concentration measurement results according to the regulations at least every 30 minutes. Stop working. When the air quality or dangerous, harmful, in danger factors causing death, injury, depression, or occupational disease for workers, the supervisor of confined spaces must report to the authority to suspend work and immediately notify the permit authority. Workers after receiving the warning must leave the confined space immediately. The supervisor notifies the rescue team in case a dangerous emergency happens. Permit authority after receiving a report calls for a work stoppage and the permit to work is immediately suspended. Respond to the emergency. When an emergency occurs, immediately notify to area authority to deploy the response according to the established plan. Prohibit unauthorized entry to the confined space to rescue when still not identifying the danger inside the confined space. Must have necessary rescue equipment before participating in emergency rescue. Finishing the work. When the work is finished, the supervisor must check to ensure that all personnel have exited confined spaces. Close the entrance or hang warning signs according to the regulations. The site and equipment are left safe and tidy. The supervisor, area authority, and permit authority need to confirm the work completed to close the permit to work documents. Compliance with safety rules while working in the confined space will keep you and your colleagues safe. With Petro Vietnam Gas, stop if it's unsafe.